Hello, my name is Om Davra. I'm the president of Comet Robotics at UT Dallas, the combat robotics organization at UTD, and I'll be talking about how we set up and ran Comet Clash, our first public combat robotics competition last fall semester. It took a lot of time and effort to set up this event, and it was pretty difficult, but very rewarding. So we wanted to discuss and explain in detail all that we had to do to set up the event beforehand and to run the event day of. The first question to ask yourself is if you really want to run an event. It is a lot of work to set up and run a combat robotics competition with any amount of robots, especially 50, and multiple weight classes. So it's a very big question to ask your whole team in your student work. There's a lot that goes into setting up and running the event, and you need a lot of people to dedicate to it. So the biggest thing to decide is if you really want to run an event. There will be a lot of setbacks throughout the whole process. We had a lot of setbacks, but it is very rewarding at the end to be able to host a large combat robotics competition and see all your friends and everyone having fun fighting robots and destroying each other. So we started planning Comet Clash in June of 2024. So that's 5 months before our event in November of 2024, November 23rd. So we started planning really early because we knew that it would take a lot of time and effort. And also there would be a lot of red tape and paperwork that we would have to get through to organize the event and make sure everything was set up to run it smoothly. So we started very early, but we could have started even earlier. We still had lots of setbacks, and towards the end, right before the event, we were rushing to get a lot of stuff set up. So it's never too early to start planning for an event. We'll make sure to start planning even earlier next time. So the most important thing to think about before starting anything is to make sure that your club has enough people and help to set everything up. You really need to have a large team of 20 plus volunteers to make sure everything runs smoothly. And you got to start the whole process very early on. So, first step is picking a time and place to set up your event. You have to think about what the registration cap will be for each weight class you plan to host, how many weight classes you want to host, when you're going to host the event, and where you're going to host the event. First thing to think about is the weight classes. We chose on doing ants, beetles, and plants. We did 16 ants, 16 beetles, and 24 plants. Originally, we were planning 16 plants, but the wait list filled up like crazy for plants, and everyone was demanding a higher bracket number. So we increased from 16 to 24 because we were confident we were able to accommodate a higher number. So that's the only reason we increased. So you also need to think about, on top of registration caps, the total number of people you're going to have. So that's not just competitors, that's spectators, volunteers, everyone. And you should round up to be safe for occupancy limits. That's one big thing to think about that you don't really think about when first trying to set up an event, is the occupancy limits of where you're going to be hosting the event. So we had 16 ants, 16 beetles, and 24 plants. So that's 56 robots. And then around 20 to 30 volunteers from the club and some of our friends that we asked to help. So that brings us to around 80 people. And then we rounded that up to 100 to account for spectators and robots, with a lot more than just one person associated with it, which happens from college teams. So 100 people was our safe number that we went with for all paperwork and everything registration wise that we had to do through the university. So once you figure out your weight classes and your registration cap, you can start thinking about a date and time. Figuring a proper date is very important, especially for a student-led competition and a competition that is going to have a lot of student orgs come and compete, that are going to need to travel and make accommodations to be able to make it to your event. So we chose a time that was close to the holiday season, we chose November 23rd, which was the day right before the Saturday right before our Thanksgiving break started. That way, we knew that most university students would be free and not worrying about finals. It wasn't that close to finals, so we knew students would be able to make the trip depending on where they're coming from, whether it be in state or out of state. We did have some teams come from other states, so that's important to think about what time will work best for not just your team to set up the event, but also your competitors coming in. And then your venue decision also depends a lot on your time. One thing to think about before figuring out your venue is having multiple dates that'll work in case your venue is already booked and you aren't able to get it in time. So another thing to think about is when other events are happening in your region. Our event was at UTD in Richardson. So there has been a growing combat scene happening. So TRC, the Texas Robot Combat Organization, was having an event November 16th, so the Saturday before our event. We started planning our event before they went public with when they were having their event. So whenever their event was decided, we started thinking if our event date was okay, since it was really close, just a week after PRC's competition. But we decided that we were considering changing the date over to a weekend later, but that was getting really close to finals time. So we decided to stick to the 23rd, even though it was a week after TRC, because it allowed a lot of the people that would have gone to TRC but weren't able to make it due to not getting on the bracket, being on the wait list, to come to our event. And it was also an event where we could let the organizers of TRC, some of our friends, come and compete at our event since they didn't get a chance to compete at theirs. There were also multiple other competitions happening on the same day as ours, one in the Houston area, which is about a 5-hour drive from our location. We did have some Houston people come and compete at our competition, though. And then the most important part is figuring out when your organization team is available, because you need a lot of people to set up and run the event. So you're not going to be able to get everyone available on time for the dates that you want, but as long as you can get the maximum number of people, you can make it work. And then picking a place. So once you got a date locked in, you can try to figure out what location you want to run your event. That's going to be a really important choice and also difficult choice, not just because of what requirements you have for a venue, but also what your university or wherever you're planning to host the event can provide. So the original place that we were planning to host our event was our makerspace, because it was the best location that already had our battle box set up and had a great pit space. But due to talking with the fire and safety team, they decided that the makerspace was not safe enough to have an event with 100 people and have it be safe enough to properly evacuate in case of a fire. So we had to change the venue that we were originally planning with, which was a big setback because that meant moving our whole battle box to a different place on campus. So then we decided on ECS West, which is the mechanical engineering building on campus, because it had a large first floor where we could set up the battle box and have enough space for spectators and the judges' tables and everyone to fit, as well as a second floor space right above the first floor where the box would be set up, which was a nice space for the pits that had ample floor space and would be perfect for setting up tables for pits. So it took about a month for us to lock in our venue when we started sending out emails and stuff. So it takes quite a while to figure out what place you want and then finally get it settled and approved. Uh, you should scope out multiple venues. We originally planned for our makerspace, and then our second and third choices were ECS West and the visitor center on campus. But we decided not to go with the visitor center because that location was great in the amount of space it had, but it would cost us to rent the space in order to run our event, and it would have cost us a lot of money. So we decided on ECS West since it was still a great location and it was free to run the event there. So so things to think about when you're considering a venue for your event is what will the costs be? Will it be able to accommodate the desired number of competitors, spectators, and volunteers? And is it available in your desired time frame for your event? One important thing for us to think about when deciding the event and if it was available in our time frame was if we could set up our battle box the night before the event and tear it down the morning after the event. That way we weren't trying to do all of it the day of, because our battle box takes a bit of time to set up and disassemble and requires a decent number of people to do so. So that was an important part of figuring out if the venue we wanted would work. And we were able to reserve both the day before, the day of, and the day after our competition. Another thing to think about is the parking situation, if there's enough parking space for your event. Because if you think about the 100 people that we expect to be there, most of those people aren't going to be living on campus or have parking passes since they're not students, since they're outside competitors. So we had to think about how we were going to get parking passes for our competitors. Luckily, our parking office supplies parking passes for events, so we were able to get parking passes for all competitors and volunteers and everyone. And the parking lot that was closest was right next to the building we were having the event in, so it made it really easy for competitors to bring all of their equipment over. The building we were running the event in also had a loading dock, so that made it even easier for competitors to bring all of their tools and bots to the event venue. And then the next biggest thing that we were concerned about, one of the top things we were concerned about, is how we were going to handle the liability of running the event. Not just the liability of us, but of our competitors, since with the combat robotics event, it can be dangerous. So figuring out liability was a very big step for us. So luckily, we were able to communicate with our risk and management team on campus, and they were able to provide us with a liability form, just a simple form that all of our competitors would have to fill out and would transfer liability not onto us, the student org, but onto UTD, the campus. And there was a separate liability form that minors had to fill out. Minors had to get their parents to fill out, which we'll talk about a bit more later. Another thing to think about is a place for soldering to happen, battery charging, and power tool usage to happen at the venue. Soldering wasn't allowed in our main area, neither was power tool usage, neither on the first floor where the box was or in the pit area. But luckily, the venue had a dedicated electronic soldering room workshop that we were able to get the keys to unlock to allow competitors to solder there and use power tools there. Luckily, the fire and safety team said that battery charging was allowed to happen anywhere in the venue, so we were able to let competitors charge their batteries in the pits. And then for liability-wise, allowing minors in the space and what paperwork minors would need to fill out was important. You have to think about the physical requirements of the space, not just where your box is going to be, but also where the pit space is going to be. So that's one of the important factors that led to us going with ECS West, because it had ample pit space upstairs, plenty of space where we could comfortably fit 56 competitors, and we also had some pit space downstairs under the staircase, which we were able to house one of the larger university teams. You have to think about charging, since everyone's going to need to charge their batteries. So how are you supplying outlets? Luckily, in our pit space, there were some outlets, but we asked competitors to bring their own extension cords, and not just you can't just think about the space, but also tables and chairs and who's going to be providing those. Luckily, we were able to let our facilities department on campus. They were able to provide us with tables and chairs. Uh, if you aren't able to get enough tables and chairs for your competitors, then you can just ask your competitors to bring their own tables and chairs, which is what some competitions do. Luckily, we were able to provide them for our competitors. You have to think about how you're setting up those tables and chairs. Luckily, our facilities department set up the tables and chairs for us. And you also have to think about the competition area where the boxes are going to be. It has to be a pretty open space and pretty close to a fire exit for safety. And we luckily had plenty of space for our big box and our test box on the side. That we had two boxes, one 8x8x4 and one 4x4x2. Only the 8x8 was used for fights. The 4x4x2 was just there to help us get all the bots through safety and for competitors to use as a test box during the event. You also have to think about what's going to be around the battle boxes. We had to have enough space for both competitors on each side of our battle box, and then on the back wall, our judges' tables and MC table and all of our media equipment back there, and all of the volunteers helping run the event and the queuing tables. So this next section is specific to how we set up our event at UTD, but it is useful for other orgs. So we have our student organization center that we reached out to pretty early on once we figured out the rough idea of what we needed for our event and what we needed to figure out for liability, especially since we had non-UTD students and minors. The SOC helped point us in the right direction with some of these questions we had. The first step for us was filling out the SARA form, which was the Special Events Risk Assessment form, where we include all of the details of the date, time, location, participant count for our event, and that form is sent to all of the appropriate UTD facilities that would contact us to determine if our location was suitable for the event. The fire department, the UTD fire and safety team, and the risk and safety team got this form and then contacted us and communicated us with deciding if our location was safe enough. It took a bit of going back and forth with the fire and safety team since, like I said, our original planned location wasn't safe enough, so we had to find a new location. And also, through the SARA form, we got our liability waiver sent to us from the risk and safety team, and we had to communicate with PACE, which is the Programs for Minors office, to get liability forms for competitors and attendees that were under 18. And we decided to have their parents take responsibility since that was the easiest option for us. And PACE helped us out with getting the liability forms and figuring that out. The next part was reserving the actual space that we decided on, the Easiest West first floor atrium and the bird's nest on the second floor, through the dean's office of the mechanical engineering department. We went in person to the dean's office to talk to them and figure out how to reserve the space, and then continued through emails and Teams meetings to communicate and figure out how we could get the space approved from the Easiest Events manager. We also had to get the space reserved through our SOC. So one mistake we made was not going through the SOC first to get the space reserved, which caused some problems with not being able to get facilities to provide us tables and chairs, so we had to go back and get the space reserved through the SOC instead of the ECS events manager, so that we could get tables and chairs provided to us. So our process was completing the SOC special room request form, emailing the ECS events manager, and waiting for the SOC to reach out to the ECS events manager to confirm our venue getting approved. And then after the venue was approved, we could get facilities and media services through the SOC to provide us with the tables and chairs we needed, as well as the media equipment they provided us with, the PA system. So the original place that we wanted was our makerspace, but since our battle box was already set up there and there was plenty of pit space, but the fire and safety team denied that. And then our second option after the makerspace was the visitor center, since it was a big open space, and that is actually the location that the fire and safety team recommended for us. But we decided not on doing that since it costed a lot of money. Next is figuring out the marketing for your event. Once you get the time and place all figured out, we took a few different approaches to marketing our event, both within our school and outside to other student orgs to come and compete. Most of our marketing to get competitors was through Discord, communicating on different Discord servers with different university clubs to invite them to our event. We also made a Robot Combat events page where we set up all of the event registration stuff. We have we created a participant guide on Gitbook, which is what this event organization guide is also on. It's not a free tool, but for nonprofits and educational groups, they qualify for the community plan. So this is a pretty useful tool for marketing and setting up your event. If you can't do this, a simple Google Doc will work too for the run of the show email that you send out through the Robot Combat Events email blasting service. Once we had our Robot Combat Events and participant guide pages, we can use those links and QR codes for all of our future communications to everyone. Like I said, we made Discord announcements and made Instagram posts and social posts, as well as putting up posters and other digital signage for our event. We didn't have the most amount of time towards the end to really get the digital signage and stuff set up, or send out a ECS all email to all engineering students on campus, but those are other options for marketing your event. Once we got all of the registration stuff set up, we created our own Discord server for Comet Clash for the event, separate from our club Discord server, which made it very easy to communicate with all competitors and volunteers about everything that needed to happen for the event, and posting all of the brackets for all of the weight classes in a place that everyone could easily access. And we made sure to send out the Discord server invite link in our Robot Combat Events email blast so that all competitors would have it. We also included the basic information about our day of the event stuff in our Robot Combat Events email blast. Branding might not be the most important thing for your org, but it was a bit important for us, figuring out shirt designs and signage and social posts. The main thing you really need for branding is a simple but memorable event name and an event banner graphic that you can post on the Robot Combat Events page. It can be made in PowerPoint, Google Slides, or Canva. wherever if you don't have a eye for design. We used Figma, which is free for educational users, and Affinity Designer, which is free for K-12 institutions and nonprofits, and Procreate. Here's our Figma file that has most of our design work for creating our banners and logos and shirt designs. For volunteers, they're a very big, important part about making sure the event will run smoothly. We created a Google form that we sent to all of our club members in our club Discord and asked some of our friends in the area to fill out, uh, getting some basic info, contact info for them, as well as asking them which uh, roles they wanted to fulfill and perform as volunteers. The main roles are your event organizers, your box runners slash ref, pit runners, check-in people, MCs, media and stream managers. Um, and one thing that we did to make it easy for our competitors to tell who volunteers were, where we got some cheap AliExpress high-vis vests that all of our volunteers wore over their shirts that we got everyone. So that way anyone could find a volunteer and ask them for whatever they needed. Some other considerations uh, is signage for the venue. We had some different important locations in our venue, like the pits upstairs and where staircases and elevators and bathrooms and the soldering station room was. So we printed out pieces of paper with the names of different locations and like directions so we could post them everywhere. Another useful thing would be to have A-frames or yard signs outside pointing people from the parking lots to the event venue. Uh, Another important thing to think about is if you want to live stream your competition and record matches and photos and set up MCs for announcements and speakers and speaker systems and stuff like that. We were able to get a lot of equipment from members loaning their stuff to us and volunteers, as well as getting some AD equipment from our uh, facilities department. Another thing is prizes. They aren't the most important. Luckily, we were able to get Repeat Robotics to sponsor our event. They sponsor combat robotics events, and they provided prize money from their store for the top 3 places for all weight classes. We were also able to get a corporate sponsor from Elegoo to donate a printer to us that to give out to the first place plastic ant weight prize as the first place prize. And then some things to think about are after your event, thinking sponsors and stuff like that. Overall, organizing and running an event is a lot of work and takes a lot of time from a lot of different people and a lot of effort, but it is very rewarding being able to provide an opportunity for people to come and be in the fun combat robotics environment and compete with their friends. So there's a lot of details when it comes to running an event. I just went over the important stuff in this. We'll also post the link to this event organizer guide and our day of the event information that we provided people